Hello and welcome to today's episode of Platinum Talks Wealth. Emmy-nominated journalist Jennifer Rogers Markwell changed gears in her television career when she realized the need to help women make sense of investing. She regularly hosts educational workshops to empower women and others to take charge of their financial future. Now, join your host, Platinum Wealth Management President Jennifer Rogers Markwell, as she leads us into the world of money memories, money infidelities, and how these can mold our relationship with our personal finances as adults. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hi, and thanks so much for spending some time with us. It's Jennifer Rogers Markwell, and you're joining us on the Platinum Talks Wealth podcast. Today, we're joined by Darryll Stinson. Darryll, thanks so much for spending some time with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's going to be epic. I'm Darryll Stinson. So I am a former Division I athlete. And I come from Jackson, Michigan, played Division I football there. And I know we might get in a little bit into that story, but ultimately survived multiple suicide attempts after my career came to an end, found hope and learned how to build my life from the inside out in a psychiatric unit, and became a storyteller, best-selling author, speaker, coach, and all the things that I'm, doing today. So that's who I am. And I'm married, 4 kids. And I just believe that the world's problems will be solved when everybody walks in their purpose.
Love that. Love that. I feel like that needs to be like on a t-shirt.
It does. It does. Walk in your purpose, solve world's problems. I don't know. And some more catchy than that. We'll figure it out. Maybe the listeners can chime in and give us ideas.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so obviously that's quite a robust journey. Would you mind starting where you're comfortable and kind of shedding some more light to that?
Yeah. So, the first thing is like, for me, I think through the lens, everybody has a story to tell. And for me, just like many other people, speaking was not something I was great at. In fact, I hated it. You probably heard the statistics around the amount of people who are afraid to speak in public. It's the number one fear. They fear more than death. Comedians say that they'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. And I was very much like that. The reason being is because when I was younger, I was teased for being a Black kid that quote unquote talks and acts white. And so it created this insecurity around my voice. Like every time I speak, am I like, using proper enough English? Am I talking too ghetto? Am I not ghetto enough? And it's like all this insecurity. In addition to that, for those who can see, my profiles and stuff, I have this big gap in my teeth. And so kids would try to kick paper footballs through my teeth, and it created this insecurity around my image as well. So I was always worried that people were like looking at my gap or like judging my appearance. And so when it came time for me to be a speaker, man, I was so filled with insecurity, and, part of that journey that I told you in terms of depression and suicide was, that was a lot of the insecurities that I had internally. And I knew I had this calling to speak, but for me, I was so much more confident in my athletic ability. I wasn't confident in my leadership ability or my speaking ability. So sports was it for me. So I became a top 100 athlete, earned a Division I scholarship to play football at Central Michigan University, was supposed to go to the NFL. I never forget somebody looking at me. His name was Coach Steve Stripling. Probably be a Hall of Fame coach. He looked at me and a guy by the name of Antonio Brown, who's arguably one of the best receivers to come through the NFL. He said, it's not a matter of if you're going to go to the league. It's just a matter of when. And he was indicating that as a true freshman, I had the potential to leave and go in the league and play professionally. And so I was like this close to my dreams. And I don't know if anybody has ever been that close to your dream. I mean, like almost there, like right there to being like New York Times bestselling author, right there to being, top number 1 podcast. Like I was right there. And then I had a back surgery, took that dream away from me. Like COVID, how it shook people's world and had caused them to pivot. That's what this back surgery was supposed to do for me. But since my identity was in my sport, I say that sports wasn't just what I did, it was who I was. I couldn't see myself as valuable without that sport. And whenever our identity is attached to something externally, we usually make, poor decisions or decisions that have, that thing's best interest in mind and not necessarily our best interest. And so in this case, for me playing hurt, I was better than the next guy fully healthy. And so I, signed a liability waiver, came back, played, and was able to start for 2 years because of something called opioids, painkillers. And so what started as taking these prescription pain medications to numb my physical pain turned into me taking them to numb my emotional pain of the fact that I knew my career was coming to an end and I didn't know who I was. I was hiding behind this facade as an elite athlete. And on top of that, I started to sell drugs all throughout the state of Michigan to be able to cover the cost of my healthcare expenses. So I was living a double life for 2 years, like this good, like jock athlete. Everyone loves him on the outside, but really behind the scenes, I was running the streets and selling drugs, and perpetuating darkness in some sense. And so, yeah, that came to an end going into my senior year. The opioid addiction got so bad that it was thinning my blood till every time I made contact on the field, my nose would bleed. And so coaches saw that clearly, man, something was wrong. They stopped by my lies that it was allergies and they kicked me off the team. And that's when I was forced to face that I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was passionate about. I said that I knew I could be good at something because I had like that drive, but I didn't think that I would be fulfilled by anything like I was. And on top of that, I didn't know who liked me for me or who liked me just because of my gift. And when you're extremely gifted or talented or wealthy, sometimes people like you for what you have, they like you for what you can do, but they don't necessarily like you for who you are. And I had a big case of that in my life. All of my friendships, my relationships were superficial. And I got tested when my girlfriend, who I was dating for 4.5 years, left me and got engaged to another man. And so football was gone, girlfriend had left, and nobody was calling. I wasn't on national television anymore. Nobody was checking in on me. Nobody cared because I no longer was walking around campus with this jersey. And so I felt like a nobody overnight. And that's where that depression came in and feelings of hopelessness and suicidal ideations, and ultimately multiple attempts that led to that psychiatric moment.
Wow. First off, thank you so much for being open to share that journey. That's a lot. What,
Yeah.
and obviously you've absolutely come through that successfully, but tell me how that turned around for you.
Yeah, so I crashed and burned. Okay. Ended up in a psychiatric unit, right? Screaming, leave me alone. I just want to die. I found faith in a psychiatric unit, gave me hope that there was a reason that I was alive. I felt like I had purpose. Didn't know what it was, but I felt like I survived that for a reason. Um, I did my first journal entry, saw my first counselor, did my first mindfulness exercise. And I started to notice that I could access the same feelings of aliveness, of excitement, of fulfillment without the external stimuli of sports. So I say that I learned how to build my life from the inside out, not just the outside in. And I kind of left that psychiatric care facility like Clark Kent becomes Superman. I was on fire. I started, getting into personal development and, all that stuff. Started to learn that I can change my mindset, my psychology, the way that I manage my money, all of these things, and had a very successful career early on in higher education. I worked in communications and did newsletters and publications and internal, external communications, won 2 awards for marketing and branding for higher education institutions. And I took that success and became a marketing consultant. I was teaching the 4 C's of marketing all the time. And, there was a lot of still, people always say, well, did it just go away? No, like I had, especially those first 2 years in terms of the mental health issues, uh, you know, tons of bad counselors, taking all these medications, et cetera, and none of it was really helping. And so I really had to learn how to find things that worked for me that wasn't being recommended to me from the healthcare system. And I say that saying like, go see a counselor. I have a counselor now. I just had some bad experiences those first couple years and finally found the right people who kind of, I don't know, was in it for the right reasons and didn't just go to school and just write people prescriptions. So, it wasn't an overnight journey, but every day, getting better, a book here, a friend here, a conversation here, a prayer here, a word at just the right time. Something that I think goes underestimated in this conversation is just how much serving others, brings me life and fulfillment and vitality. I think the more that I started to give my gifts to other people, even though I was afraid and insecure, the more I had kind of this safety net when those thoughts would start to come through my mind again of like, man, you don't belong. I'm like, no, I know I belong because I've seen the tangible impact that my gifts and my story has had on the lives of other people. And so that's kind of what pulled me through those early seasons.
That's super powerful. Super powerful. And now, I mean, you're a speaker on many different platforms and stages across the world, in essence, right?
Yep. Yeah.
What brought you from that point of, and again, you shared your journey, but from the point of like, I'm not a good speaker. I can't be that person to now look at you now. Gosh.
Just commitment. And I say commitment as like if I'm honest, it's just God, man. I just feel like I don't know if you know, ever felt called to do something, but when you feel called to do something, it does not leave you alone. And it's like you can ignore it, you can suppress it, you can make excuses, but there's like, even if it's just the 2% of you, there's always going to be that little lingering, like, that you're dodging your assignment on this earth. And so it was that feeling that kept me continuing to invest in myself and put myself out there and try to speak and do things that were uncomfortable. There are some practical things. I have clinically ADHD, PTSD, clinical depression, and anxiety. So I got a lot of things going on. So I could literally not put one complete train of thought together when I first started. And so one of the earlier exercises I did was I practiced mindfulness. I practiced brushing my teeth, only focusing on the tooth that I was brushing. I couldn't think about work, couldn't think about the text messages I wanted to respond to. I couldn't think about, I could look at myself in the mirror and think about my eyes. I only could focus on the tooth and that sensation. And that started to train my mind to focus, which really helped me when I spoke to connect trains of thoughts. Okay. The other thing is I invested a lot in speaker coaches. I probably learned from you probably name them. I'm probably like, yep, bought that, high ticket that, yep. Les Brown, Eric Thomas, Lisa Nichols, John C. Maxwell, Pete Vargas, Pat Quinn, Bishop T.D. Jakes. All of them have coached me in some regard. And I learned something from everybody, Les Brown being another one, if I didn't mention that already. And just learning different things from each speaker, different points. There were some key points in there. I'd say like probably the biggest thing that I always tell people is, everybody says this about like, hey, it's not about you, it's about the audience, right? And I was saying that, but it was kind of like head belief. It wasn't how I was actually showing up. I was still showing up because I had deep insecurity and I wanted people to affirm me, applaud me, validate me. I wasn't really trying to give and change lives, even though that's what I was saying. And that was, some of the experience that people was having. There was still that internal and subconscious belief that like, man, I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. And doing this gives me affirmation. I'm not truly coming from a place of giving, right? I'm saying you're supposed to speak from affirmation, not for affirmation. And I wasn't doing that. And I did this speaking engagement at a youth conference. It was a couple hundred youth there, probably about 500 or 600. And towards the end, there's about 14, 20 people or so standing in line waiting to say thank you. And the last person at the end of the line, I'll never forget, was this 14-year-old girl. And she comes up to me. And keep in mind, this is where I was still doing the thing, but wasn't really like doing it to the level that I'm doing it today. And she looks at me with tears in her eyes. She pulls up this wristband. You can see these cuts on her wrist. And she said, my parents dropped me off at an orphanage last year and never explained why. And she said, I haven't told anybody this, but I've been cutting myself for the last year because I felt like something was wrong with me, that they no longer wanted me.
Oh,
And she said, but there was something about hearing your story today that gave me the strength to come out with mine. That did it. Obviously, I hugged her. Ironically, there happened to be somebody at that camp that was a lady from Operation Christmas Child. She had been to 14 different orphanages before. So she was able to come alongside this young lady and like spend 2 hours just talking her through it. But that moment is when I realized that I was focused on my image and I wasn't focused on my impact. And it changed me. And I said, man, how many more people could I help in this way if I just got over myself and I stopped worrying about how I look, how I sound, what people are thinking, if I'm being cool enough, if they're gonna clap, if they're gonna say it was great, if they're gonna tweet, if they I stopped worrying about all and I just started to focus on, man, how can I make more impact? And here's what I learned that might shock you. I learned that the impact that I made in the lives of other people was directly connected to the amount in which I was willing to be vulnerable. Meaning, the more vulnerable I was, the more impact I made. And the problem was I hated being vulnerable.
It's an
I
uncomfortable
hated it.
place to be, right?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm a former D1 athlete. We don't do vulnerability. We do, you know, smashing helmets and athletes don't show weakness. Men don't show weakness. On top of that, I was raised because I was in the hood and my mother primarily raised me early in life. She didn't want me to get bullied. And so anytime I would cry, she would tell me, be quiet, stop crying, stop acting like a baby, stop acting like a girl. And if I keep crying, she would say, boy, shut up or I'll give you something to cry about. And it taught me to suppress my emotions. And so when it came time for me to speak and open up and talk about my pain and my depression and my insecurities, I was blocked. I didn't even have emotional vocabulary to describe the vulnerability I was being called to. I had to get one of those emotional wheels just to find a different word than angry and frustrated. And so I started to do that, and little by little, engagement by engagement, experience by experience, I got more confident. I got better. I figured out how to put structures to stories. I figured out how to open myself up. I figured out how to move the audience. I figured out how to navigate and have fun and do all those things, and just got better over time because I was a student of the game and because I couldn't deal with that nagging voice whispering saying, Darryll, you are called to this.
Mic drop, right? That's a mic drop moment. I resonate with parts of your story so much because I feel like once you open your heart, right? Clearly my story is much different than yours, gosh, but my grandparents raised me because my mom was super young when she had me. So grandparents were mom and dad. So they were my people. And they helped me get on the track that I was on. And when my grandpa passed, we found ourselves going like, oh gosh, he was the guy in the family. And they didn't have a lot at all, but what they had was spread around different places. And I found myself going with my grandma to different banks and whatnot and never had that warm fuzzy feeling that anyone cared in her best interest. And she's like, if we're going through this, imagine how many other women are. And I said, I'll learn everything I can. I would have never put myself in that place or planned that out for myself. It was that dropped into you and that's your path, right? You're on that river, you're going, you're not fighting it upstream. The water's not hitting your back. You're just going with it and seeing where that unfolds.
Yes, 100%. Wow,
Yeah.
that's inspiring. You got an inspiring story as well.
Thanks. I mean, gosh, yours is making me speechless though. Thank you again so much for sharing that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So one thing we talk about on this podcast is money memories.
Yes.
So what's a money memory that you had as a younger person or a child that really helped mold your relationship to money as an adult?
All of it. I grew up broke as a joke. And it's so funny. In some ways I didn't know until I didn't know I was broke till I stayed over my, I say rich friend's house, but it was middle class friend's house. And found out that, oh man, y'all have carpet, you know, y'all have meals, right? Y'all don't have free lunch and all this stuff. So money believes, man. Money doesn't grow on trees. Money was always a challenge for me growing up. My mom and my dad had joint custody over me. And for the first like 3 to 5 years of my life, my dad wasn't really active. And so he owed a bunch of back child support by the time he came into my life. And so money was always this thing where if I needed, sports dues or school clothes, like it was always like, well, ask your dad. Well, no, I paid child support. Ask your mom. Well, we just never had it. And we were always doing these things to try to get it. And my mom would do whatever she had to do in order to get it, whether it was take out credit cards or borrow money and never pay it back or rob Peter to pay Paul, like all of those behaviors. And so my mom was very much like scarcity, like integrity is not intact. Like you just do what you have to do to survive. And my dad was more like scarcity, hustle and grind because he was an athlete. So he was like penny pinch, like, don't buy anything that you don't need. I remember like everything I would ask my dad for, even if it was like go to the movies, like $20. You know what I mean? And he would make me like come up with all of these reasons and rationale. And did I check the different movie places? And did I look at maybe going during the matinee hours instead of going at the 8 o'clock movie? And it's like, dude, nobody's going to the movie in the middle of the day. I'm trying to go with my friends. And so all of these things shaped my beliefs that when I grew up, even as an adult that knew better, I still carried those behaviors subconsciously into my relationship with money. And so even when I had it, I was still hustling and penny pinching and wouldn't invest in myself and wouldn't give myself anything unless it was like important or I needed it. Forget paying for a want. I can't have that. And had a lot of integrity issues too in money that I didn't really realize because I wasn't like robbing from people, but still loans, credit cards, that type of thing picked up later in my journey.
How did you change your narrative to get to where you're at now?
Ooh, geez. Honestly, I would say I'm still in some of it. Some of it's so deeply ingrained that
Yeah.
you don't know. As a matter of fact, I found out like just this past year how much of that stuff I still have because now I have a lot of money, and it's like I'll still tell myself I can't have some, or I'll check the price first, and it's like why? It doesn't like it's not like you can't afford it, but there's still that mentality for some reason of like, oh, it's too expensive. you know? And so some of that I'm still working through. But there were some growing moments. One was my first high ticket program, $20,000. And I remember the dude told me that, and I didn't even have like 2 grand. I only think I had I had like 200, but I definitely didn't have more than 1,000 at the time in the bank. And he was like, I thought it was gonna be like, I don't know, like 500 a month or something like that. He said 20K, and I was like, like 20K? I was like, what costs that much? I had no clue about high ticket. I thought he was scamming me. And he said this thing to me that helped shape my money mindset. He said, okay, so he said, you don't have it in your bank account. I said, no. He said, well, could you say that there's $20,000 in the world? I said, yeah, there's a bunch of money in the world. He said, well, why don't you ask yourself, what do you need to do to access the abundance that's in the world? And I was like, I didn't think about it that way. I was only thinking about what I had in my hand. I didn't think about what was available in my life. Okay. And sometimes that's where people focus on. They focus on what's in their hand, what's in their bank account, what they owe, what they got coming up. They don't focus on what's available around them in their life and their relationships. And so that was a huge moment for me because it started to shape more of an abundant mindset. And I
Mm.
started to look outside and I started to see wealth circulating everywhere. I mean, from the guy cutting the grass to the person doing the roofing to the person washing the car, it's just circulating. And all I had to do was be of service. And so that was a big, big moment for my money mindset that shifted it.
So that kind of goes hand in hand with the infidelity question. So what's a financial infidelity that you've either experienced or witnessed that you
Yeah.
think people could learn from?
All right, I'll tell you something that won't make me cry. I'm an emotional person, so um it's kind of funny. So I was staying at this apartment, and you know how they do the referral fees if you refer other people?
Mhm.
Okay, so we stayed at this apartment. We were there for we signed a 12-month lease. We were there for like 2 months. We referred somebody, and we didn't like the place, and we ended up moving. But we wanted our $500 referral fee, so we subleased our apartment out. Number one, we weren't supposed to do that because they didn't want people to sublease, but I did it anyway, so I wanted out. So there's a problem, infidelity. So sublease when I wasn't supposed to sublease. The second thing is that they said that the tenants had to stay there for 3 months in order before we got the $500 referral fee. And so I was gonna tell the front office that, hey, we sublease, your problem, I'm out. But I was trying to wait till I got my $500 first because I didn't want them to be like, he's gone, I guess $500. And they ended up getting a fake e-check from the tenants who we subleased to, and then they ghosted them. And so
Oh,
technically we had 2 leases, all because we wanted $500. And it was so frustrating because my wife was like, don't worry about the stupid little $500, but I wanted it so bad because of that poverty mindset. I wanted it so bad that I had a lapse of integrity just to get it. And then it ended up in a situation that was really bad where we had, 2 rents. let alone not got the $500. And so long story short, the lady, just because, and this speaks to like, you never know who's watching, you never know who you're talking to. Always be a good person. I was doing a community it's like a festival, and I had like a vendor booth table. I was working for a church, and I was just doing community service. Ran into this lady. I didn't know she was the manager of the apartment. She ended up calling me off the record and manually moving the lease from my name to the tenants who ghosted us name. Off the record, like literally couldn't talk to me on the company cell phone, called me on the other on her personal cell phone, and told me like, "Hey, do not mention that you were staying there. Like, I got you." And so she ended up resolving the situation and putting it on the people who, essentially weren't paying her, because we were at least on time for our rent. And she saw that I was a good person and she wanted to help me. And so I
Wow.
really, really appreciate it. So that could have hurt us a lot worse than it did. And then we laugh about it now. Like, remember you did that just for $500? How stupid was that? So
Man, a life learning lesson, right? Chalk it up.
100%,
Yeah.
100%.
Good. Well, as we start to wrap things up, the final question I like to ask is, what are some tips and or tricks that you use to utilize money differently in your household?
Well, number one, like anybody, like you got to manage your money correctly. So we have a budget and we look at cash flow. Like some people have a budget, but they don't manage cash flow. And it's like budget is just an idea. Cash flow is where the actual work is done. And so that helps. And 100% of the time, when we look into our cash flow numbers, it's always better than what it feels. We're like, oh, God, we haven't had a sale in like 3 weeks. Oh my gosh, you got to hurry up. And then it's like, you still got payment plans coming in. Like cash flow is good. So that's a really big piece to look at that and to make those shifts and adjustments. Use we use QuickBooks. That's really helpful for us. And then talk about our relationship with money. I've done a lot of work within that. And I think that's a good discipline or a good practice to take yourself through. Is like, what are my real beliefs around money? What is my relationship? Do I feel nasty? Do I feel dirty talking about it? And if so, how can I start to have a healthier relationship with money? Because if you think money is nasty and greedy and a bad thing to have, or wealthy people are, greedy, or you have any of those beliefs, then that's your relationship with money. And if you don't like money, money won't like you. So that is a practice that I have consistently around money.
I always say, money's a tool and it should be used as a tool. Money shouldn't be your God, but money is a tool, right? That's it.
100%. Yep.
Well, good. Thank you so much for sharing everything and spending some time with us today.
100%. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. And hopefully those of you listening or watching will join us on the next Platinum Talks Wealth podcast.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, Platinum Talks Wealth, please subscribe and share. For more information about Jennifer Rogers Markwell or Platinum Wealth Management, please visit www.platinumwealth.net. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member of FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. The guest speakers and their companies are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Platinum Wealth Management.